As somebody who's brought back to life in our time, in particular, two presidents, Truman and Adams, but we're talking about Adams here tonight, people who lived between two more famous, more celebrated people, Roosevelt and Eisenhower in his case, Washington, Jefferson in Adams' case. How, in short, would you characterize Adams' role in the founding of America? It's a story you take us into. How would you edit yourself down to the Reader's Digest minus version of how and what this remarkable man who you've chronicled so vividly, whose life you've drawn us into after a really long neglect?
I think that I think it's his defense of the British soldiers in the Boston Massacre trial. That's where you see what that man's made of. When they did the HBO miniseries, they opened the first hour. That happens in the first hour. And I thought that, I was thrilled that they used that. Here was a man who was on the political rise. He was brilliant, he was well-read, he was tenacious, he was a very skillful practicing lawyer, and young still. And people were really noticing him. And then the soldiers were captured, and everybody in the whole Commonwealth were looking forward to having them executed. And but they had to be represented in the trial, and no one would represent them. No one would defend them. And Adams said, if we really believe that everybody deserves legal defense in a trial, we better live up to what we say we believe. I'll defend them. And he did so, certain that it was going to ruin any ambitions he had to play a part. To the credit of the people of that time, it made him, because they realized he was right. And the idea that he not only defended them, he got them off. And he got them off because of a very clear and fair and convincing argument. And he was known as Honest John. And it wasn't, you call the big tall guy Shorty. He was Honest John, almost to his detriment. He was often tactless because he would be so honest about what he thought of people or situations. He was very articulate, and he was willing to get into the arena. Jefferson wouldn't set a toe near the arena, wouldn't stand up and argue in front of people in Congress for anything. And you could just say, well, he was shy or whatever. Adams got right in there, and he's the one that put the Declaration of Independence over with his battling on the floor of the Congress. Forcefully. Same guy that got the British soldiers off. He knew how to do it, and he was damn good at it. And then when somebody had to go to France, and nobody wanted to cross that ocean with the British Navy controlling the ocean. It was tough enough, dangerous enough, even if we weren't at war, across the ocean. He went, speaking not a word of French rather. Taught himself how to speak French on the way over. Shows you how long it took to get across the Atlantic. He meant what he said, and he said what he meant. And an elephant's faithful 100%, as you remember from Horton Hatches the Egg, which is my first book that I ever had. It belonged to me. He had a terrific wife. He's the only founding father. Most people don't know this, but I think it's so important. The only founding father who never owned a slave as a matter of principle. And his wife felt the same way. She saw that slavery was a sin, evil, unjust, un-American. And they never changed in that point of view whatsoever. And he had this love of learning. Jefferson said, any nation that expects to be ignorant and free expects what never was and never will be. Adams wrote into the Massachusetts Constitution that there will be education for everybody, and then he went on to why there should be education. And I think that he also had what I feel is the true sense of what we aspire to succeed with. And I want to just read this, because I think it's one of the most potent things ever said by an American. It was written for his family. It wasn't written for a public address or anything. It's very short. He said, I must study politics and war that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture, in order to give their children, and you notice he shifts from his sons to children. So he's bringing women in to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain. Now that's the upward climb for him. Not so they'll get rich, or they'll get powerful, or they'll be celebrities. It's the rise of a cultivated, civilized civilization that he foresees. And it all comes out of what you do at the beginning, building this foundation, creating this country. And then when he writes about how we should celebrate in the future, celebrate July 2nd, not July 4th, because July 4th was simply the day they signed the paper, signed the document. The real day, the day they put it over, was July 2nd. And he said it ought to be celebrated with bonfires and fireworks and all the singing and dancing from one end of the continent to the other. Now, writing that in 1776 when the country wasn't even up to as far west as the Allegheny Mountains. And yet he's talking about this vision. So he has two visions of this North American continental empire, the purpose of which is to create an advancing civilization through education. And what a great theme. And the fact that he signed this institution, the Library of Congress, into existence, I think really says a lot. He was exactly the right person to have done it.